Honor.
Thanks. Stan, will you address the court?
Yes, sir.
Okay, prosecution.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. My name is Anthony Reed, and it is my privilege to represent the state of South Carolina in this case today. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, a crime has been committed, a killing defined by the court of law as voluntary manslaughter. On the 18th of December, 1988, the late John Walker Barrett, husband and stepfather, was fatally shot by his wife, Barbara Allen Barrett. At approximately 9:40 p.m., after he had arrived home from work, the couple had an argument about their marriage. John Barrett told his wife that their life together was no longer working and that he wanted a divorce. Barbara promptly burst into tears and left the room, reportedly saying to John as she left, "You'll be sorry." Less than 10 minutes later, John followed her into the living room, and Barbara shot him a total of 5 times, in the thigh, shoulder, twice in the back, and a final fatal shot to the back side of the skull, killing him almost instantly. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not a case disputing who killed John Barrett. Everything about this case directly points to the sad truth that a wife, Barbara Barrett, shot and killed her husband after almost 10 years of marriage. This trial and case are an argument of whether or not Barbara Barrett should be lawfully incarcerated for her crimes. We as prosecution strive to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Barbara Allen Barrett committed with criminal intent the voluntary manslaughter, the unlawful killing of a human being in the sudden heat of passion. Using the testimonies of several first-hand witnesses, we have sufficient proof to convict Barbara Barrett and incarcerate her as lawful punishment for her crime. Defense can either plead not guilty by reasonable doubt, by reason of self-defense, or by reason of insanity from battered woman syndrome. But we as prosecution can prove that these pleas are invalid with several reasons. First, we'll look at the testimonies of Barbara, Officer Cheney, and the Barrett's housekeeper, Lee Porter, to disprove the validity of these claims. If defense is pleading not guilty by reasonable doubt, we will easily point out Barbara's unwillingness to admit any recollection of events immediately prior to John's shooting, claiming she simply didn't remember. Defense may also claim Barbara is not guilty by reason of self-defense. But we will point out that the fact that John has never had any history of harming Barbara, and question why, of all these times, would he decide to kill her the night he was going to leave her anyways. And finally, defense may plead that Barbara is not guilty by reason of battered woman syndrome. But aside from Barbara's own claims of being a battered woman, we will show you that through examinations there was no evidence of John ever beating his wife. We will question Lee Porter and Barbara's psychologist, Dana McGuire, and show how her own diagnosis of learned helplessness, the key element in battered woman syndrome, directly contradicts Barbara's actions on the night of the shooting. Ladies and gentlemen, as a prosecution, we want you to render Barbara Barrett guilty, not just for the sake of winning this trial, but for the safety of her 2 children and their hometown in Haydenfield, South Carolina, for their sake of criminal charges, and also for the sake of her brutally murdered husband, John. Don't forget who the victim is. John Walker Barrett is dead at the hands of a jealous and murderous wife. The state thanks you for being here this afternoon and assisting us in our fight to serve justice. Thank you.
Thanks. Would you like to make an opening statement now, or would you like to wait till after the close of the government's case?
I'd like to make an opening statement now. Good afternoon, Your Honor, jury, members of the audience. We are all gathered here today for the murder trial of Barbara Allen Barrett. She has been accused and indicted of killing her husband, John Barrett. Today we will show you how she was the victim in this scenario and accidentally ended a vicious cycle. Mrs. Barrett will testify today to the violence she suffered at the hands of her once loving husband. She will tell you that she acted out of terror, the terror of reliving a nightmare. Dan McGuire, a licensed psychologist, will tell you that about a syndrome called battered women syndrome. This syndrome affects women who have suffered through abusive relationships. She will tell you that patients that suffer from this syndrome after some time with it almost always suffer from mental breakdowns as the stress builds. It will be shown to be undoubtable that Mrs. Barrett suffered a breakdown as her own husband advanced upon her with a belt in his hands, prepared to beat and strangle her as he had before. We will show you today that our client is not guilty by reason of mental instability from battered women syndrome.
First witness.
Prosecution would like to call witness Barbara Barrett to the stand.
Defense. Then that is the victim, or that's the accused, or the defendant, correct?
Yeah.
you want your client on the stand?
No, sir.
All right. I think we need to call on a witness document.
Prosecution would like to call witness Lee Porter to the stand.
Please have a seat by the stand. Take a stand. Stand behind the witness chair. Raise your right hand. Put your hand up.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Please have a seat, Mr. Porter.
Mr. Porter, how long have you worked at the Barrett's house?
6 months.
Mr. Porter, in Barbara's testimony, she claimed, quote, "I was usually beaten or abused at least 3 to 4 times a year, sometimes so severely I could not leave the house for days. I usually stayed in the house at the beatings and had the housekeeper bring me meals into the bedroom. At any time, did you deliver meals into her bedroom as she claimed?
No, I'm not.
At any time, did you ever see any cuts or bruises on Barbara Barrett?
No, I'm not.
Mr. Porter, in Barbara's testimony, she often claimed John was prone to drinking and would often become intoxicated before beating her. Have you ever known John to be a drinker?
No.
Did you ever notice any tension between John and his children?
No.
According to Barbara's testimony, John would often beat and abuse her severely. Have you ever seen John physically or even mentally abuse Barbara Barrett?
No, I'm not.
And Lee, how was John's behavior towards you when he was home?
He was nice.
You said earlier in the day, prior to the shooting, you heard what sounded like a car backfiring coming from the backyard, did you not?
I did.
Can you explain exactly what you meant?
It was a sound similar to a gunshot.
And when you came down the stairs to see what had happened, what did you see?
I saw Miss Barrett go through a door she rarely uses, holding a gun.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Your Honor, I'd like to submit Exhibit A of the defense witness statement of Lee Porter. Would you
Can I see the statement? Show that to the defense. Show that to the prosecution. Any objections from the prosecution?
No, Your Honor.
Defense, why do you want to enter this exhibit into evidence?
Because unnamed facts, when Mr. Porter was directly examined, there were facts that were not mentioned that I would like to bring up.
Why don't you bring them up through your questioning?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you don't need that statement. You can use that statement if he has issues with it, he doesn't remember something. But why don't you ask him first if he remembers statements or to question him first?
Okay, sorry, sir.
No problem. Go ahead.
I would also like to exhibit Mr. Porter, you said that you heard noises from the backyard. It sounded like a car backfiring, correct?
Correct.
Could you say without the shadow of the doubt that what you heard is what you say it was?
Yeah.
Without the shadow of a doubt? Because it was outside in the backyard. You said it sounded like a car backfiring. There's a reasonable chance that it could have been a car backfiring. You also said that you saw Mrs. Barrett come through a door she didn't normally use, correct? Your Honor, I'd like to enter Exhibit B of the defense, the diagram of the house.
Do that to the fail if no one look at it. Show that to the prosecution. Is there any objections?
No, Your Honor.
That's entered into as prosecution, as defense exhibit alpha for identification.
So, like I said earlier, you said you saw Mrs. Barrett come through a secret door, a door she didn't normally use, correct? I would like to I would like you to show me where the door is on that diagram, because I don't see the door on that diagram. I see a front door, but I don't see another door. So the door's not on this diagram. Interesting. One last question. You said that you were arrested once.
Yes.
Yet you claim you were innocent. Correct? It would seem like if all the evidence pointed to you, then you did it. No further questions, Your Honor.
Government, do you have any questions on that based off of the cross-examination?
No, Your Honor.
Mr. Porter, you're excused. Government, your next witness.
Your Honor, prosecution would like to call Joe May to the stand.
Raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Good evening, Mr. May. Mr. May, in your examination of John Barrett's body, you determined how far away the gun was from the body, correct?
Yes.
And what did you determine?
That the body was at least 2 feet away from Barbara when she shot him.
Is this true that all the shots were fired at him?
Yes.
How many shots were fired at John?
6.
How many of the bullets entered his body?
5.
How many bullets entered John from the back?
4.
How many bullets entered him from the front?
1.
So John was not facing Barbara when he received the first 4 shots.
Correct.
No further questions.
Mr. May, you are a licensed pathologist, correct?
Correct.
Merriam-Webster Dictionary says that a pathologist is one who interprets changes caused by disease. Mr. Barrett didn't die of disease, did he?
No.
No. You also said you conducted an autopsy of the body?
Yes.
That's interesting, because on your record, you said you marked that you examined the body
Correct.
instead of conducting an autopsy.
Correct.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Government, do you have any other questions based off of defense witness questions?
No, Your Honor.
Dr. Joseph. Next witness.
The prosecution would like to call Don McGuire to the stand.
Mr. McGuire? Who's that?
Your Honor, we would not like our witness to go to the stand at this time.
Who is he?
Psychologist, Dr. McGuire.
Doctor, is he? Whose doctor is he? Whose doctor is he?
The defendant, Mrs. Barrett's.
And has Dr. McGuire been given, has Mrs. Barrett been given consent for her doctor to disclose personal medical information? you know?
That's, no, Your Honor.
Government, why do you intend to call this witness?
We would like to question some of her diagnoses of battered women syndrome.
Well, there's been no evidence that she's been a battered spouse at this time. If the defense intends to call her or call this doctor as a witness, you can cross-examine him based off of his testimony. But at this point, there's been no evidence that there is a diagnosis of battered spouse. So
Defense has stated that Barbara was a battered woman in their opening statement.
that's not the opening statement is not evidence. That's just what the defense says that they're gonna call, as opposed to what your evidence is going to be. So, what is your evidence that the defendant, Ms. Barrett, murdered or killed her husband?
Then,
Yes, ma'am. That's what I said.
Prosecution would like to call Barbara Barrett to the stand.
Again, this is the defendant. She doesn't have to testify. She's the one who's on trial.
This rule was never mentioned in the mock trial guide.
The Fifth Amendment right to not self-incriminate. U.S. Constitution. I also believe the mock trial guide prohibits you from calling the other team's witnesses as your own witnesses.
Prosecution would like to call Sam Chaney to the stand.
Raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Officer Chaney, at what time did you arrive at the Barrett's house?
Approximately 9:57 p.m.
When you arrived at the Barrett's house, where was Barbara?
Locked in the downstairs bathroom.
Was Barbara saying anything when you found her in the bathroom downstairs?
She was saying she was only screaming and crying. No words were apparent at the time.
I would like to ask that again. Was Barbara saying anything when you found her in the bathroom downstairs?
When I brought her out, she was saying how she bitten off her tongue.
Was Barbara at all unresponsive?
No.
Did Barbara seem to be in any sort of non-functioning state?
No.
Officer, did you find anything next to or near John's body when you investigated the scene?
There was a firearm and a open letter.
Who was the letter addressed to? Can you please give a brief description of the letter?
It had several descriptions of the supposed name Tootsie and explained how John Walker Barrett loved her and wished to meet her.
And this letter was open next to John's body, correct?
Correct.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Mr. Cheney, you said that you had no recollection of reading Miss Barrett her Miranda rights, correct?
Correct.
Mrs. Barrett also said she didn't remember heard you reading Miranda rights, correct?
Correct.
And you didn't have a partner with you to testify for anything you say today. It's all based on your word.
Correct.
You created the diagram of the Barrett's house, correct? In an earlier statement, Lee Porter said that she didn't remember. He didn't remember. He didn't see the secret path, the door that Mrs. Barrett came through with the gun.
Correct.
So either Mr. Porter was not telling you the truth about the door, or you did not draw your diagram correctly, correct? Because there's a flaw in the system here. There's a flaw somewhere, correct?
I can neither confirm or deny.
No further questions, Your Honor.
You're excused. Prosecution, do you have any further evidence?
No, Your Honor.
Defense, do you have any evidence to present at this time?
Your Honor, I would like to call the first witness for the defense, Barbara Barrett, to the stand.
Ms. Barrett?
Motion to approach the stand.
Yes.
Raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Would you introduce yourself to the court, please, Mrs. Barrett?
I am Barbara Allen Barrett, and I am 47 years old.
Can you tell us about the first time you met John Barrett?
I met him at an alumni function that he had come to with his sister, and we talked a lot, and we probably both had too much champagne at one point, and we were walking down a pathway, and he pushed me into some flowers and started getting fresh, and I somehow was able to leave the scene without feeling fresh.
Can you tell us about your continued relationship with Mr. Barrett?
Well, he, after the, that, incident at the, alumni function, he called me to apologize several times, and, we started seeing each other a few days later, and, a few weeks before the wedding, when all of the preparations had been made, he, came over to my house after work, and I could tell he had been drinking. And he asked me to fix him a drink, and hoping to avoid the scene, I fixed weed drink on purpose. And he threw the drink, when he tasted it, he threw it against the wall, and pushed me against the wall, and slapped my face. And we both started crying, and at that point, I realized how much we needed each other, and he promised he never touch me in promise again, and I believed him and went ahead with the wedding.
Did Mr. Barrett have any habits or traits that you would like to share with the court?
He would drink a lot, and he had a bit of a temper.
How would you describe his faithfulness and temperament throughout your marriage?
Things were quiet for the first 8 months after we got married, but one day he called and said he would be home late. I became concerned when at midnight he was still not home. So I went to his office and I saw that there was a light on inside. And I went in and he was on the couch with some girl I'd never seen before. And so I ran home as fast as I could, and when he got home, he was very angry with me and told me that if I was a real wife, he would have to spend time with other women. And then he, I tried to run away from him, and he
You say he beat you. Can you give us more details about the abuse you've suffered at the hands of your husband?
The meetings would run in cycles about 3 or 4 times a year. I never knew what I did to set them off. I always tried to keep him calm and not be in any trouble.
Are there any specific details of the beatings you'd like to share?
Well,
Did you seek any solutions from the beatings?
I went to my minister and asked what I should do. He said I should just try to forgive my husband, and so I tried to be as forgiving and loving as I could be. And I went to a few doctors, and one of them prescribed me tranquilizers to help me cope with the pain, and the other asked me what I did to set off the pain.
Was there anything important that happened before the 18th?
A few weeks before the incident, John came to me and said that our marriage was in trouble, and I told him that I would give up my volunteering at my volunteer work that I had been doing so we could start again. And at the time he seemed fine with that, and so I thought everything was going to be okay. Also, he became very sloppy in his personal habits a few weeks before the incident, and the housekeeper was always picking up after him. He, at one point, right about a week or so before the incident, he took his belt and tried to beat and strangle me, and I knew he was trying to kill me, but I didn't think I would actually die.
Can you tell us about the 18th of December?
John came home late, and I was frustrated with him for continuously coming home so late, and I told him that he should not be coming home as late as he hadn't come home, and he told me it was none of my business and that he wanted a divorce, and I said I didn't believe him because I had tried so hard to keep everything together, and I thought he was trying to keep everything together as well. And our housekeeper had fixed a supper, and so he was sober at the time and sat down and was sitting, and I was crying and he was crying a lot because he told me to leave the room. So I went into the next room and poured myself a glass of wine to help me think. And I saw him, he came into the room after me and with his belt in his hands, and I thought he was going to try to beat me again as he had before. And I don't remember anything after that until the police officer came and took me away.
Was there anyone else at all in the house that night?
The housekeeper who was in the house.
Can you tell us anything about Lee?
I wouldn't trust anything Lee has to say about this because I caught him taking loose change from the drawer where John keeps his personal belongings the day of the incident.
Can you tell us about the officer that you met that night?
He did not read me my Miranda warnings. I would not have said anything if I knew I didn't have to say it.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Prosecution would like to re-examine the question, the witness. Prosecutor. Barbara, how long have you been married to your husband, John?
8 years.
In In your testimony, you claim to have seen doctors about your injuries given to you by your husband John. Do you still have any bills or evidence of having seen them?
Not at this time.
Have you ever reported any of these alleged beatings to the police?
At one time, I did report it to the police after I had fallen, and it had lain unconscious for a few hours. But there's nothing they could have done.
Do you have any personal evidence of the beatings, such as dated journal entries and photographs?
No.
Do you have any witnesses, such as neighbors, friends, or family members, that can confirm these beatings?
Very few people have witnessed any of the beatings. My parents would have been very upset if the facts were made public.
So you cannot, in fact, prove to this court that your claims are true?
Yeah.
Barbara, in Lee's testimony, she claimed, and I quote, "The day of the shooting, I heard some noises in the backyard sounding like a car backfiring coming from the backyard. After a while, I saw Mrs. Barrett come into the house through a private door that she never uses. She had a gun in her hand. Is this claim true, or can you claim otherwise?
It is not true.
Do you have any proof for this?
Not necessarily, but I wouldn't trust anything you have to say about me.
Prior to the time of the shooting, had you known about your husband's affairs with another woman?
I had seen him a few times, well, once with another woman previously.
So they were also known to you previous to the night of the shooting, correct?
Somewhat, yes.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Ms. Barrett, you're excused. Defense?
May I have a moment, Your Honor?
Sure.
Your Honor, I would like to call the second witness for the defense to the stand, Dr. Dan McGuire.
Raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes.
Motion to refer to stand.
Witness.
Can you introduce yourself to the court, Mr. McGuire?
I'm Dan McGuire. I'm a licensed psychologist. I have worked with several battered women. I have a master's degree in psychology, and I've written a book, Living in Hell, Life of a Battered Woman.
Can you tell us what a battered woman is and what battered woman syndrome is?
A battered woman is a woman who is abused by a man, who is abused by a man. And over the years, as I have worked with over 100 battered women, I've been able to classify a battered woman into 3 phases. The first phase being where tension starts to mount between the man and the wife, and the man might show it a little, but the woman will usually try to hide it so as not to create a scene. After a while, they can move into the second phase, and that will make where the man will start to physically or verbally abuse the wife or the woman, and that can last for either a few hours or a matter of days. After that phase is over, they move into the third phase, where the man shows extreme kindness to the woman as to be sorry for what he did, even though on the inside he feels as if he has taught her a lesson. The woman usually sees the man as a begging dog in this phase.
tell us about your interactions with the client?
I saw Barbara several times. The soonest I saw her was 2 weeks after the incident.
Are there any symptoms to battered women syndrome that you think the court should be aware of?
Battered women have suppressed anger, and that is due to fear of they suppress the anger due to fear of the battering man. And they can also have severe mental breakdowns where during this time they have no control of their actions.
Are there any other side effects of the breakdowns? What is your diagnosis of the client?
Mrs. Vera is a classic case of battered women syndrome. During some of the times that we met, and she was alright, it was a classic case.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Mr. McGuire, what is your particular field of study in psychology?
I deal with battered women.
You've studied victims of battered woman syndrome before, have you not?
I have.
Would you describe Barbara Barrett as a battered woman?
I would.
Can you please define your opinion of what a battered woman is?
A battered woman is a woman who is abused by a man.
Mr. McGuire, when you first met with Barbara Barrett after she killed her husband, is this correct?
2 weeks prior, yes.
You've had no prior meetings with her.
Excuse me?
You've had no prior meetings with her. You had not met with her before she killed her husband.
Correct.
You were not present during any of Barbara's beatings or alleged battering cycles?
No.
Could you please briefly describe the theory of learned helplessness you used as proof of Barbara being a battered woman in your testimony?
So, the learned helplessness theory was tested on animals to see how they would react when minor shocks were attacked them when they tried to leave, let's say, a kennel. And eventually they learned helplessness, and they gave up trying to escape the kennel. And eventually, after the shocks were stopped, they had to pull the animals out.
And you say Barbara was in a state of learned helplessness when she killed her husband, correct?
Yes.
In the experiment you depicted in your testimony, did the dogs ever try to lash out or attack their batterer in any way?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
And in the experiment you depicted in your testimony, did the dogs ever lash out or try to attack their batterer?
No.
Did the dogs ever try to hurt their batterer in any way?
The first couple of times.
But after a while, they did not?
Correct.
In the last part of the experiment, when the cage doors were open for the dogs to go free, did the dogs ever see this as an opportunity to escape their suffering?
No.
This accurately displays their condition of learned helplessness, correct?
Yes.
And you're claiming that even though Barbara was in a state of learned helplessness, when her husband told her he was leaving her, it made her angry, leading her to kill her supposedly battering husband?
Yes, that was due to the when the repressed anger, as I explained it earlier, how when something shocking can happen, it can release all that anger, and they will have a severe breakdown, and they have no control of their actions at that time.
Though in your testimony, in the experimentees never tried to hurt their batterer in any way.
Correct.
Mr. McGuire, as a doctor who's worked with mostly female victims of battered women syndrome, is it possible that you have any sort of bias towards women in these cases?
No.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Doctor, you're excused. Thanks. Do you have any other witnesses?
No, Your Honor.
All right. No other evidence by the defense, prosecution, government. Are you ready for your closing statements?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, defense wants you to let Barbara Barrett be released without punishment for her crimes under the pretenses that she was a battered woman, that she was insane and did not know what she was doing. But through examinations of several witnesses, we have proved that there is no reason for why Barbara Barrett should not be indicted for her crimes. Ms. Barrett claims that she was a battered woman, and by this was driven to madness that made her kill her partner, John Barrett. But aside from her own personal claims of being a battered woman, is there any proof that she was one? In Barbara's testimony, she claims, quote, "I was usually beaten or abused 3 to 4 times a year, sometimes so severely I couldn't leave the house for days. I usually stayed in the house after the beatings and had the housekeeper bring me meals in the bedroom." Her housekeeper, Lee Porter, who was with them almost every day for half a year, reported to have never seen any injuries on Barbara Barrett, even when Barbara claimed she was bedridden from injuries given to her by John. Wouldn't Mr. Porter at least have seen a bruise or scratch if Barbara was so battered she couldn't even leave the house, much less her own bedroom, when in fact there isn't any supporting evidence to prove Barbara's claims of being bedridden or having meals delivered to her at all? Barbara claims she's seen doctors about her supposed injuries, which would help prove her claims are true. Yet defense has submitted no doctor's bills to use as proof of having seen any doctors. Barbara has told us herself that she reported one incident to the police, but she also claims the police officers could not do anything to stop this domestic abuse. Couldn't Barbara at least have had a friend or neighbor that could confirm the supposed abuse directed towards her? She doesn't have any. There is not a single witness in this whole case that can confirm John ever laying a hand on Barbara Barrett. And prosecution can't help but ask, ladies and gentlemen, isn't it convenient that the only time Barbara openly claims to have been a battered woman and seeks help is after she's accused of murdering her husband? Now we will address Barbara's strongest argument to support defense's wish to see Barbara's charges cleared. Her supposed picture-perfect example of learned helplessness, a condition that goes hand-in-hand with battered woman syndrome. Dr. Don McGuire's testimony supports the idea that Barbara is a battered woman, and we have pointed out her theory's serious logical flaws. In Dr. Don McGuire's testimony, he diagnoses Barbara with learned helplessness syndrome, a theory tested on dogs by Dr. Samuel Michaels. In his experiment, he tested locked dogs in a cage representing women trapped in a marriage they did not want to be in. He then administered random electric shocks to the dogs, representing abuse directed towards these women. According to the study, the dogs tried to fight the shocks at first, but they soon realized there was nothing they could do about them, and they stopped fighting them, sending them into a passive state. When the cage doors were later opened, the dogs were so frightened they couldn't even leave the cage, much less lash out at their torturer, further proving their learned helplessness. Barbara supposedly lines up with all these symptoms except the last and most crucial sign. Barbara, when she saw an opportunity to leave her cage, did. Not only that, but she lashed out in fury at her batterer and killed him. According to Donna's testimony, a woman wouldn't have chosen that route and perhaps done the exact opposite, maybe begged her husband to stay with her. But she directly contradicts the symptoms she supposedly have of being a battered woman, thus proving the very basis of Barbara's claims invalid. Next, we'll address Joe May's examination of John's deceased body. As you heard, Mr. May determined that through the absence of powder marks on the body, John was at least over 2 feet away from the gun, therefore at least 3 feet away from Barbara when she shot him. He could have been 3 to 100 feet away from her when she shot him, proving that he was not even close when she pulled the trigger. Not only that, but Joe also found that only one bullet entered him from the front, and the following entered him from his back. John wasn't even facing Barbara when she shot him 4 out of 5 times, not to mention the last and most crucial hit entered him from the back. Ladies and gentlemen, according to Sam Cheney's diagram of the house, John had run from room to room trying to escape Barbara's bullets aiming at him, leaving a trail of blood behind. As you can see, defense has left some very serious questions unanswered. Have they yet proven to you beyond a reasonable doubt that Barbara meets up with their claims? No. Then why did she kill her husband? Because of the other woman in John's life. She knew John wished to divorce her and marry another woman. She even confessed to have known about his affairs, and she'd seen him cheating on her. On the day of the shooting, she found the love letter he'd written to his paramour, and John finally told her how he felt. "I've had it with you, Barbara, and I'm leaving tonight." Those were his very words. The reason Barbara Barrett killed her husband is because she knew he was going to leave her, and she decided if she could not have him, no one else could. Thank you.
Jerry. Today we, as a defensive team, set out with a goal. That goal was to prove our client not guilty, as we know she is. Today we are showing you that Mrs. Barrett acted out of fear and was not in her right mind at the time of the killing. An expert witness has told you that she does indeed show all the signs of being a battered woman and therefore having battered woman syndrome. Our client lacks malice, and according to South Carolina law code, malice is an essential component of murder. Without malice, our client cannot be guilty. The prosecution has made claims that our witnesses cannot be validated, but neither can theirs. One possible lie is just as valid as another. They also claim that the animals, when removed from the cages, did not lash out to the people who had harmed them, but animals have a lower level of reasoning than a human being, and a human being would most likely naturally take the chance it was given to fight back. They also said that Barbara we ask that you deeply consider all the facts given you today and return a verdict of not guilty for reason of battered woman syndrome.
Okay. Thank you very much, government, prosecution, government defense, jury, and we will adjourn at this time for this round is over. Please come back at 3 o'clock and we'll start round 2. All right, we're on break until 3 o'clock.